Good morning, students. I am Munshi Rashidul Islam, Assistant Professor of Department of Mechanical Engineering, JIS College of Engineering. Now, today's topic is design of disc brake. So, yesterday we have discussed on design of a braking system, but now today we have to discuss design of disc brake. So, last day we have just covered the some portion of the design of drum brake. Now today we have discussed the design of disc brake. So disc brake it is actually a brake that is actually similar to that of the disc clutch, and the main part of the disc brake that is actually is circular type disc and or the plate that is actually rotate along with the rotating drives that drives or member that is actually attached to the machine elements. Suppose for example, if I use a disc brake assembly that is actually fitted to the in front wheel of the vehicles, that vehicles maybe depends upon the two two-wheeler or any type of any type of vehicles that maybe depends upon the the most of the cases of the motorcycle or bicycles. But nowadays disc brake is actually extensively used in the most the of the motorcycle in the front wheel as well as rear wheel, and in automobile vehicles it is actually fixed by a one replacing shoe brake. That is actually the principles or the mechanism of the disc brake, and that is actually we can discuss in the today's topic. And in this topic most of the part are covered in the disc brake, because the one circular type of plate or one circular type of disc that can be used to rotate the total braking force or braking torque on the wheel. Now next, anti-locking braking system, that is the full short form is ABS. So in ABS method, the locking system is the main criteria. So, ABS is a system on motor vehicles which prevents the wheels from locking while braking. That means if I use the braking load on the pedal, and the ABS system is ABS system is occurred when the motor vehicles which is actually prevent the wheels resistance force. That resistance force is actually coming from the um, pedal force. Now the purpose of ABS is number one, to allow the driver to maintain steering control. That is actually case number one for the purpose of using ABS system braking. And point number two, to shorten braking distance, to shorten braking distances. That also the second purpose of the ABS system. A typical ABS is composed of option A central electric unit, and that central electric unit is mainly provided the electric purpose, electric source from the input to the braking torque system. Number two, four wheel speed sensors four wheel speed sensor that is actually connected to the each of the wheel, then one for each wheel. That is also be important point to discuss the ABS system. And next point is two or more hydraulic valves on the brake circuit. So two or more hydraulic valves that is actually used for the ABS system of brake circuit. Now, electronic unit constantly monitored on the rotational speed of the wheel, and when it senses that one or more wheels is rotating slower than the others, it moves the valves to decrease the pressure on the braking circuit, effectively reducing the braking force on that of the wheel. That means we can easily access the ABS system when the four wheels, one for each wheels that is actually connected to the various types of wheel speed sensor. An advantage of ABS and a disadvantage of ABS. So why we can use ABS system rather than the any other conventional braking system? We can use shoe brake, drum brake, band brake, disc brake, etc. But why we can choose the ABS system? So some advantages are there, some disadvantages are also be there. So first we can discuss the advantage, then we can discuss a disadvantage of ABS. Now number one, it can be used for reducing the stopping distance. So that is actually the advantage of ABS system. So it can be used for reducing the stopping distance. That is actually the advantage of ABS. Next, point number two, it enables to steer when brakes are firmly applied. It enables to steer when brakes are firmly applied. Number three, it allows braking firmly on surface with different level of grips. It allows braking firmly on surface with different level of grips. And point number four, it can review and adjust the driver's driving. It can review and adjust the driver's driving. These four are the mainly advantages of ABS system. Now we can discuss some limitations are also be there in ABS system. Number one, driver may take more risks when driving with vehicles that is actually fitted with ABS. So driver may take more risks when driving with vehicles fitted with ABS. That is actually point number one. Point number two, people who are inexperienced inexperienced in using ABS, people who are experienced in using ABS may respond inappropriately may respond inappropriately when they active the system that is actually the second disadvantage of ABS system. Now again we can concentrate the disc brake. So a disc brake is a type of brake that uses calipers to squeeze pairs of pads against a disc in order to create friction that retards the rotation of the shaft, such as a vehicle axle, either to reduce its rotational speed or to hold it stationary. That means if I use the disc brake, both the axis in input axis or output axis, one shaft can be replaced by a one fixed member or a stationary member. That member or that part is actually attached to the disc portion. That disc portion is actually calculated to find out the total braking torque or braking load that is actually applied on the pedal. Now point number two, the energy of motion is converted into waste heat which must be dispersed. The energy of motion that is actually converted into waste heat and which must be dispersed. Now, hydraulic disc brake, hydraulic disc brake, hydraulic disc brakes are the most commonly used form of the brake for motor vehicles, but the principles of the disc brake are applicable to almost indifferent rotating shaft. That means if we can use the disc brake, so one portion of the shaft that can be connected to the one rotating shaft and that also be attached to the input shaft, and then that input shaft is mostly useful to rotating the all parts of the front wheel as well as the rear wheel. Now next, compared to drum brakes, compared to drum brakes, disc brakes offer better stopping performance, and that performance because of the disc is more readily cooled. As a consequence, discs are less prone to the brake fade caused when the brake component overheat. When the brake component is overheat, disc brakes also recover more quickly from immersion. That immersion means when the wet brakes are less effective than dry ones. When the wet brakes are less effective than dry ones. That is actually the case of disc brake uses as rather than any other manual braking system. Now, next point is the rotor is usually made of cast iron, but may in some cases be made of the composites such as reinforced carbon composites or ceramic matrix composite or in metal matrix composite. So that composites is mostly used for the purpose of using the rotor, which is actually made in cast iron. Sometimes polymer matrix composite also be used for the using of better lifelong. How a disc brake. Now first we can see how a disc brake works. So here are a one figure of disc brake. So two plates or disc are there. That disc are mainly circular base type. Now that red portion obviously a piston, because if a external load is applied, the piston moves to the towards the disc, and in left hand side, once two blue portions are inside the cylinder piston, and left hand side another blue portion are there, that is actually inside the caliper. So if I put the external load, and that load is passing through the pistons, that pistons press the brake pad, and that pad, the both sides pad are each pressed on the disc, and due to the pressing in the braking pad, so some friction will generate and frictional force will generate, and due to the some frictional force, some reaction will be there. The reaction means some heat will generate during this braking system, and that is actually the working principle of disc brake. And the lower portion is actually attached to the rotor, as well as the half portion are there, so that will also be fixed to the on one side disc, and another side disc is attached to the driving member, and that driving member also be connected to the piston portion. Now, how a disc brake occur? Now, when a brake lever or pedal is pressed, when a brake lever or pedal is pressed, the push rod which is actually connected to lever, the push rod which is actually connected to the lever or pedal, and master cylinder piston pushes the master cylinder piston pushes the master cylinder piston, and this movement allows the master cylinder piston to slide and return spring push the return spring inside the bore of master cylinder. That bore of master cylinder means the cylinder is connected to the pedal total piston force, and which is actually generates high pressure in the reserve tank. High pressure in the reserve tank. That is actually the basic working principle of disc brake, and that disc brake is the most economical and fundamental braking system. It requires less floor space or less area, but it effective both the direction and forward direction as well as the backward direction. Now, at this moment of a primary seal allows the brake fluid, which is actually reservoir tank, to flow over its into the brake hose pipes. But in case of a secondary seal, ensures that the brake fluid does not go other side. Now, then the fluid enters into the cylinder bore of caliper assembly via brake hose pipes and pushes the caliper piston or piston rods. At this time of the piston ring moves in rolling shape with piston. Total load will applied through the paddle, and it passing through the piston, and that piston is pushes the total load into the brake pad, and that brake pad is actually connected to the both the direction, both the sides of the um, disc, and that is actually pressed when the total applying load is applied. Then the caliper piston pushes the brake pad, This movement actually caused the brake pads to stick with brake disc, which is actually creates friction and stop the brake disc or rotor to rotate, and this way the disc brake system stops or slows down the vehicles. Now this is actually a view of how a disc brake will work. Now if you see the figure, some points are all that points are already covered up in the last two three slides. And dust cap, wheel hub, wheel stud, brake disc or rotor, brake disc or rotor, slide pin, brake pad, and obviously the ventilation slots, caliper, bleed valve, and piston housing. These are the all parts which I which when I design a disc brake. But first of all, we have to know the fundamentals, principles of disc brake. Then you can go through the design, and these the following points. These are the following points you have to consider during the braking systems, and that braking system is most economical and very useful for nowadays. So now today's world, without this brake, it is not possible to work or to drive any type of bikes, any type of four wheeler, because it is more sensitive, easy to control, and obviously time consuming, and sensitiveness is too much high than the any other conventional braking system. Advantages of disc brake. So we already discussed these points. Now just we can touch the points, each and every point quickly. Number one, disc brake requires less effort. That means less effort to stop the vehicles compared to the drum brake. That is actually the first advantages of disc brake. Now, point number two, it generates less heat. It generates less heats compared to drum brake. For the same brake torque, it generates less heat compared to drum brake for the same brake torque. That is actually point number two. Point number three, ease of maintenance. As as disc brake is outside the wheel rim. Ease of maintenance as disc brake is outside the wheel rim. That is actually the third advantages of disc brake. Now next point is it worn out the brake shoes that are not changed the proper time, and it can cut the brake drum in drum brakes. Now the disc brake are not have such problem. Now next point is it is much safer than the drum brake in hard braking conditions. It is much safer than hard drum brake in hard braking conditions, such that it is actually under the conditions of drum brake that can be lock up the rear wheel. And next point is it cools down faster compared to the drum brake. It cools down faster than the drum brake. That means if I when I am not using the disc brake, it is actually quickly cool than the any other braking systems. Now next point is disadvantages of disc brake. Now number one, it is expensive compared to drum brake. Number one, it is expensive compared to drum brake. Number two, more skills required to operate disc brake. More skills required to operate disc brake compared to drum brake. That is actually the reason why some people are not comfortable with disc brake. So if we are not using this disc brake in full confidence with full controlling system, sometimes it may be harmful for the drivers. Now next point is, if any air remains in the disc brake system, so it can be causes accident, as the brake will not occur effectively, and next is, disc brake assembly has more moving parts. Disc brake assembly has more moving parts and much complex than the drum brake. Disc brake assembly has more moving parts. That means some moving parts also be there, and that may be high complex than the drum brake. And next point, it requires a lot of effort at maintenance. It requires a lot of effort at maintenance from front, like brake fluid, change of brake pads, etc. That is actually compared to the drum brake. But one question is there, as we apply the similar method of clutch. So here again we can use the two methods that is actually similar to that of clutch theory. That is actually uniform pressure theory and uniform wear theory. But we cannot assume that both the theories can be effective for the both the direction of the processes. So as we know, in the clutch design, the friction radius that is actually counted in RF, capital R suffix small f, RF. So if I use the uniform pressure theory, so we can write RF is equal to one third of capital D cube minus small d cube, capital D square by small d square. So from that conditions, the total equation will come, that is actually total torque transmitting capacity, that may be mt is equal to mu prf. Here mt is equal to total torque transmitting capacity, and mu is equal to coefficient of friction. Total p, here capital P is equal to total force applied, and rf means the friction radius. But one question is there, how can we calculate that capital P? That P means total operating force. That total operating force, that is equal to actuating pressure into the area of the pad. That means how much portion is covered by the pad. So suppose if I see the theta angle portion is covered by the pad, so and total intensity of pressure that is actually applied on the pad, so total actuating force capital P will be total intensity of pressure, that is actually indicating small a, into the area of the pad, that is actually capital A. So total force applied on the pad, that is equal to the average intensity of pressure into area of the pad. And if I calculate the capital P value, then we can use the main equation, that is actually mt is equal to mu p rf. And that is actually the basic formula of disc brake and total torque transmitting capacity equation. So that's all for the disc brake, and next class we can discuss on the one new topic and one new lesson, that may be in design of hydraulic brake. Thank you.